Recording.
All right, go for it.
Oh.
You can start. No, you can start.
So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Hayley Gill. I'm going to do a presentation on my research from high school, which was an artificial magnetotaxis in Blackers giganteus. But before I go into that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about me. So I'm from Colonia High School, and I was really lucky because my school had this awesome science research program for the kids who were accepted into it. It allowed us to do our own independent research and really investigate the things that interested us. So I actually stumbled across a few different projects, and initially I was doing disease dispersal by insects. That transitioned into carnivorous plants, and I went to the Pine Barrens. And I also did a project with bees. So I went through a few different ones, and then eventually I ended up at my current research project. And one thing you may notice about all my projects is they all involve insects. So for me, I've always found insects very interesting. I think their morphology is fascinating. They're capable of doing things that other animals a lot larger than them aren't even capable of doing. You hear all the time about like ants that are capable of lifting 10 or 40 times their weight, or a flea that might jump 6 feet even though it's only several millimeters across. But overall, they're just like, whether it's legged locomotion or winged motion, they're capable of doing just tremendous things. And that's also inspired all these different types of robots and biotechnology relating to insects themselves. As I was showing a few different robots, there have been researchers that have been considering creating robots that can be implemented in mind collapse scenarios. So basically, there have always been robots that were quite larger that were sent into mines so that you don't have to send people in and risk people getting hurt or damaged in that way. But some researchers have said, oh, why don't we try to send in smaller robots, perhaps robots that have been based on cockroaches or other insects. And while this idea is a great idea, it would still be very expensive in and itself, because you'd end up having to send in probably 30, maybe 3,000 to 5,000 different units into these mine collapses in order to even have a chance at rescuing anybody or figuring out where anybody is. So there was other research that went into investigating if cockroaches could be used, or other insects. They in themselves could be used as units to be involved in rescue scenarios. Do you have a question?
Can you just real quick screen share your slides so that they can see them? I don't think it's actually showing up in the Google Hangout. That makes sense. You should be able to hit the little screen share. If you go to the far upper left, the green screen share thing, and you just do your whole screen.
Or click this.
Or that's fine.
Is that?
Yep.
Is your mic on?
I hope so.
Yeah, it's correct.
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me now?
You can check the green little bubbles. That means you're talking. It doesn't matter. As long as Google's back.
All right, cool. Thank you. Sorry.
Wait, actually, it looks like you do have to click full screen because this isn't showing.
It's not sharing.
It's
If you're present. Yeah.
Is it?
go back into the hands.
And hope Adam doesn't walk closer, or else we'll start getting massive feedback. Cool.
Click screen share again. And just do full screen.
Yeah, so like my brother's high school says and someone and she forced me to take that.
went into using insects such as cockroaches as units that could be sent into mine collapse scenarios in order to rescue survivors. And how this, well, basically, before I go into any of the specifics, I'd like to explain to you how kind of cockroaches navigate over a surface. So basically you have a cockroach, and the cockroach has its two antennae that it really relies on in order to feel for any obstructions. It doesn't have the best sight or anything like that. So as a cockroach is going, it has its two antennae in front of it. And if, let's say, its right antenna makes contact with an object, then it knows that there's an obstruction on its right side. And a signal travels to its brain, telling it to move to the left in order to avoid that obstruction. And that's what I just explained. So it's possible to artificially trigger this natural response using electrical microstimulation. And electrical microstimulation involves using electrodes in order to stimulate either a group of neurons or muscles in order to produce a desired movement. It's actually something that's used not only for insects or other animals, but people themselves. It's widely used in the medical field. For example, many of you may know cochlear implants. Also, many athletes will use electrodes in order to work on muscle toning. The technology is also being explored for prosthetics, and something that I just found very interesting is about 200 years ago they were doing experiments using electrical microstimulation in order to map out the brain itself. And they found that by stimulating different areas of the brain, you could produce different effects in people. For example, if you stimulated the motor cortex, then people would start experiencing muscle spasms. And then additionally, if you stimulated some areas that were involved in visual processing, people would actually begin to hallucinate or see glowing orbs or black spots in their field of vision. So there's been quite a few different types of research out there on insect biobots. There's been a few on cockroaches. For example, over here, can you see my mouse moving? No. Okay, I'll just point. So right there we have a Madagascar hissing cockroach that has an implant that is used in order to remotely control it. This is a giant flower beetle, and then we have some different types of moths. Specifically the giant flower beetle I found very interesting because it was the first study that actually successfully controlled the flight pattern for a period of time. You have the moths, but it's using electrical microstimulation in order to control the flight pattern in moths is actually very difficult. Not only because you have the moths carrying a huge piece, or maybe not huge, but still a piece that has some weight to it on their back, but also because there's just so many small components involved with navigating in flight that's just been very difficult to accomplish. But all of these, they've gone on at, I believe, North Carolina State University, the University of California. A lot of them are actually funded by DARPA. So if you go and you look at all the different types of research out there, you'll begin to notice that none of them actually involved working on the ability of an organism to detect some source. So, for example, when I was talking about a little bit before with, I'll just here. When I was talking about before with sending cockroaches into mine collapses, yes, that would make a little bit more sense than sending $100 small robots in, but you would still have to have an individual behind the seat of a computer remotely controlling each of these cockroaches, navigating them through a mine or whatever area that you're trying to explore. And that would waste a lot of time and money in and itself. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to try to demonstrate that it's possible to have a cockroach independently or search autonomously without constant input from a human being. And I wanted to do this by connecting the organism's nervous system to electronic sensors and having it respond directly from signals generated by these sensors. So originally I had wanted to do it with radiation sensors, but the school wasn't too happy with me bringing in radioactive isotopes or whatnot. So I ended up settling on Hall effect sensors, which are types of magnetic field sensors. And I use these sensors in order to try to demonstrate that I could in fact give cockroaches a magnetotaxis, and the definition of magnetotaxis, as you see here, is the capability for an organism to detect and respond to magnetic fields. Many of you may be familiar with homing pigeons, but magnetotaxis has also been expressed in deers, bats, salmons, a variety of different organisms, but not specifically cockroaches. So, as I just said, the goal of my research was to create a magnetotaxis and to demonstrate that it is possible to use the technology and research out there in order to link the nervous system directly to electronic sensors. So let me talk a little bit about how you can actually make bioelectronic interfaces in cockroaches. Well, it involves a surgery. So initially, I would anesthetize the cockroaches in water because they're cold-blooded. So if you cool their bodies down, they will virtually go to sleep, in a sense. And I would actually have to sand off a waxy coating that the cockroaches had because many of you may be familiar, cockroaches aren't specifically sanitary creatures. So they actually evolved with a waxy coating around their exoskeleton that would keep microbes from sticking to them. So in order to secure the electrode connector on top of their pronotum, I would have to sand off the coating in order to use the cyanoacrylate to fuse it on. So after the connector has been attached to the pronotum, which I should have said, the pronotum is the area above the cockroach's head. So let me go back really fast, just to explain this. So that area that has the black spot, that's the pronotum of the cockroach, and it extends over, it's kind of like a hood, over the cockroach's head itself. Right behind the wings, behind the pronotum, like underneath the wings, slightly up from the pronotum, is called the thorax, and I'll get into that just now. And that's where I made a thoracic piercing in order to create a circuit within the cockroach. So here we are. So this area is the thorax. I'm using a needle in order to make a puncture. And I inserted the grounding wire and secured that again in place with cyanoacrylate. It kept the moisture from